Man, the Feral rework just sucks, and it's so sad with all of the cool hero talents actually doing almost nothing for the spec, and with the spec changes making Feral feel even worse and more boring to play than it is currently in Dragonflight. I don't want to be overly negative, but it's not looking great for Feral in the War Within. So let's start talking about the class talents, which are probably one of the very few positive things that Feral has gotten, and actually to give credit where credit is due. In the terms of the spec talent trees, getting to the throughput nodes is accessible, and it actually gives you some choices to get into your utility nodes as well. The throughput nodes that you might want to look out for are definitely Primal Fury and Instincts of the Claw, which are weirdly placed within the talent tree, so you know that you have to get through them. And the two other nodes that you need to know are Lycara's Teachings and Rising Light Falling Night, which are placed very far away from the regular Feral talent points, but you still probably want these for your damage, specifically the Rising Light Falling Night. It's not obvious that it doesn't affect Feral because it increases your overall damage, as opposed to talents like Astral Influence that we know it does not affect Feral anymore, which you might have wanted in the past. Now we already had a blue post talking about melee range, that they don't want melee range to be this big anymore. There are a bunch of utility nodes that make it so that if you want to pick them, stuff like Typhoon, stuff like Remove Corruption, even Innervate will lock you in. It's a very restrictive talent point build, and it just feels like you have very few options, as opposed to classes like Warlock and Monk, but mostly Warlock, where the amount of damage and throughput nodes has been reduced to about 5 or 6, while the rest just being different flavors of their class, which is something that we could definitely get to see in Druid as well, considering that maybe Druid is the hardest class to design the class talents for, since it has 4 specs. But putting the throughput nodes into fewer nodes and just increasing the overall flexibility of going into the flavor of the other specs might work better for Feral in the future. Right now it feels very restrictive. You can still get it, but it feels like you're sacrificing a lot for those points. Going into the spec talent tree and the spec rework in general, the main idea of the spec rework is to reduce the speed at which you generate energy, because they want Feral to be a little bit more tactful and not just spammy, and actually make you care about your energy, which is great. I love that. And also to reduce the uptime of Tiger's Fury to be an actual burst cooldown ability, which I am all for that as well, and not a maintenance buff, which is boring, I do admit. I am all for this direction of Feral. However, the implementation so far seems very off, and at least from an average Feral's perspective feels very cumbersome and annoying to play with. And if people have to go look up video guides or written guides or talk to like big brain Ferals to figure out how they should play and what they should feel good about, I feel like that was a failure in terms of its design. First of all, let's talk about some of the new talents. We have Coiled to Spring to replace the old something deal more single target damage to the boss. I forgot the name of it is, but this just points out the main issue with Feral at the moment is if you generate a combo point in excess of what you can store, your next Ferocious Bite or Primal Wrath deals 10% more damage. Not only does this promote very bad habits in learning and playing Feral correctly, because you never want to overcap combo points, but it also rewards bad playstyle, and it also makes it very apparent that Feral has a problem with over-generating combo points, and that is a problem that needs to be fixed to the talents that generate that problem, and not add more talents to fix an existing problem. Also, if you are an actual good Feral player that does not overcap combo points, this is a dead talent. You're never going to pick this. And even if you are a bad Feral, you should still not pick this, because it will make you into a bad Feral still. Don't pick this talent, and that is not probably what you want to hear when you see a new talent being designed. Similarly, we have Resourceful Hunter, also a talent that doesn't make sense for Feral. It increases leech and versatility by very trivial amounts, I might add, because it's on a row where you take a lot of other abilities that, or a lot of other talents that are very expensive and you really want points for. If you want me to care for something that has nothing to do with Feral, which is versatility and leech, make them fatter bonuses. It would still probably be a boring talent because it just gives you flat throughput, but hey, maybe I'll just be a Feral that has a lot more leech. Maybe make it give 15% leech. That way you can increase its survivability, and it's also on a row where you have survival instincts, which it makes sense, okay, I can go different ways to get my defensives. But it links into Rip node, so it doesn't really make sense. Rampant Ferocity is gone, and in its place we have Savage Fury, which makes Tiger's Fury increase your haste by 8% and energy recovery rate by 20% to address the issue with, I'd call it issue, but it's mostly a direction of changing the energy regeneration and the uptime on Tiger's Fury, and the propensity to force you into haste, or at least make you care about haste, because together with this, Predator has also been changed. We're going zigzaggy through the talent tree, but that's fine because there's a reason for this. First of all, Tiger's Fury will only last 5 seconds longer, and it will no longer reset if a target dies with bleeds on them. This, of course, addresses the issue with permanent Tiger Fury uptime, but it also adds additional duration. I thought we were not looking into extending the duration of Tiger's Fury, but just making it more impactful. And there are other nodes that do this exact same thing still. But the bigger change to Predator is probably that your combo point generating abilities direct damage is increased by 40% of your haste. That sounds like a pretty big increase, and it sounds like we really want haste at that point. Is this enough for a Feral to look at and say, oh, I guess haste is probably one of my best stats to get? It's not very obvious, and it only affects the direct damage and not the bleed damage, which is what Feral kind of specializes in. And we will see more focus towards upfront damage instead of actual bleed damage. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but Feral is the rip and rake spec, right? It does have bite, but where's my bleeds? And if we're going to live in a world where energy regeneration is slower, can we have tireless energy be only 1 point? Having to spend 2 points here feels so expensive, and I have played both with and without tireless energy, and the difference is massive. You will want to play tireless energy. Maybe at the beginning of the expansion, this is more impactful, and by the end, maybe you won't need it, which might not be that bad as a design, because listen, I'm a better Feral now, I have more gear, I don't need to spend points into this. I have enough energy. Maybe that's okay. It just feels bad that it's still 2 points, but that's probably a little bit too nitpicky. Relentless Predator is gone, but I think nobody ever played with that. It was never really a particularly good talent, but it also came with a change to Taste for Blood, which makes Ferocious Bite deal flat more damage and more damage during Tiger's Fury instead of actually doing more damage based on the amount of bleeds, significantly diluting the interactions with bleeds that the cat has and more upfront feral damage with Ferocious Bite, which is something that, from what I've been able to see in the feral community, nobody really likes more ferocious bite damage. Everybody just wants more bleed damage. So I don't know where all of these changes are coming from, but they don't seem to be coming from the feral community's perspective. It just feels like weird changes. And all of these might be fine if we wouldn't still have the Berserk issue with over-generating combo points, which I've addressed before. But even more atrocious than this is the fact that Berserk still makes it really bad for you to play Feral Frenzy and Convoke after it, which is what you would want to play if you read the changes to Berserk, where it just increases your flat damage by 10% across the board and not just Shred and Rake. But using the cooldowns that way will just make you waste even more combo points. And the Coil to Spring does not fix that, because you're wasting way more than one combo point, and having one combo point back feels like a little nudge, like a little take a little bit of piece back. It's not solving the actual problem. And also we've had the cooldown reduction for Berserk just a flat out 60 seconds instead of actually interacting with your rotation by consuming combo points or generating combo points. It was, you know, by playing your rotation, you reduce the cooldown of Berserk more. That's just a boring change to make the spec more boring. I don't see the value in changing it that way. And we go to the Druid of the Claw talents, but before that, I do have to say a thank you to our patrons, which are probably the most positive part of this video, unfortunately. But fortunately for the patrons that are supporting the content, making these videos possible, since it is a little bit wacky to fully rely on YouTube ad revenue and having to be able to use the Patreon's love to make more of this possible with better quality videos, more research, more content, more footage, all of that just makes it so much better to be a content creator. And if you like our content and you want to support us a little bit more, consider checking the Patreon link down below. We would love you for it. And you might even get more goodies in terms of 4K customizable wallpapers with your character on them, access to bloopers, Patreon podcasts, and more stuff like that. Even early access videos like this one. But we're moving on to the hero talents, which are the Druid of the Claw, the more impactful ones of the two hero talent trees, and also the one that probably causes the most amount of problems, tying into the Berserk issues that we talked about, where it makes it very hard to properly play your class with blood talents, talent, with Ferocious Bite being casted at 50% energy because the energy regeneration is slower now. Now you add on top of that massive attack procs, which is the core identity of the Druid of the Claw talent tree, which you probably want to expend at the right amount of time, and sometimes you have to wait for that to happen. And to do that, you might overcap on procs if you don't have enough energy or enough combo points to spend because you're waiting on energy, or you overcap combo points, or you might not spend the massive attacks with blood talents if you're doing Berserk and you overgenerate combo points and you just want to spend them right away, which feels bad. There's also the fantasy of Druid of the Claw, which I personally really love, and it has been in my heart since Warcraft 3, and that is with the shapeshifting fantasy with Wild Shape Mastery that wants you to swap into Bear, which is something that cats don't really want to do unless they want to survive a certain mechanic, and that happens very rarely when it comes to the defensives that you have access to because they're stronger now, so you'll even want to be a bear more rarely than right now in Dragonflight. To more incentivize this, we have other talents like Wild Power Surge, which makes it so that when you go into bear, you can also do more damage with one mangle or one swipe that just deals just the same amount of damage as it does in Feral. It doesn't feel like a payoff. It might feel like, oh, you don't want to feel that bad for going to bear and losing too much damage, heals a little bit more damage, but you're still not getting combo points and you're generating rage that you're incentivized to spend to get armor going back into cat form, which is again pointless because you're never taking constant damage for that armor to be relevant while you're going into cat form as well, unless you are an actual bear guardian tank and you want to swap into cat for a little bit more damage. So it feels at odds with what Feral is trying to accomplish and what this talent tree is telling us that you want to care about. And its counterpart is empowered shapeshifting, which makes frenzy regen being able to be casted in cat form for 40 energy, which is not something that you really feel good about doing considering that you're generating way less energy than before, and the alternative buff that you're getting is 5% more damage on Mangle and Shred and Brutal Slash, or Swipe, but let's be honest, it's going to be Brutal Slash, which is incredibly underwhelming for a talent to be picked. And then speaking of underwhelming, the same thing goes for Pax Endurance, where Stampeding Roar duration is increased by 25%, even though you have to take Stampeding Roar, which makes some of the talent points that you can pick in class talent tree be even more inaccessible, but the extra duration feels very useless, because at no point in time is having a longer duration Stampeding Roar going to make it more impactful or make you feel good about spending a talent point to get, because there are no mechanics that want you to be able to move for that long, because those are usually bad mechanics, and you normally want to stop moving as fast as you can to start doing damage or healing once again. A much better design for this could be something to increase speed by more, by just being faster, or actually add something like, I don't know, Avoidance or Leech to your party during Stampeding Roar or a little bit after as well, to make it feel like it's a cooldown that you want a Feral in your group for. And I'm just going to mention that most of the other talents are just, again, flat, boring passives that don't really change much of your gameplay, and the capstone is a clear indication of that, where you just get more massive attacks during Berserk, not just in general, but only during Berserk. It doesn't augment or changes or elevates the overall talent tree to the next level like most other hero talents do. They just give you more of the thing that you're already getting, which feels underwhelming. And speaking of underwhelming, Wildstalker is the epitome of underwhelming, where it's just pure passive. If you are a Wildstalker druid, you might not even know that yourself, since it doesn't really change anything. You just have passive more bleeds or passive more hots, which don't really matter that much for Feral. The only thing that you might feel like it's different is maybe stuff like Entangling Vortex, where enemies pulled in by Vortex are also rooted, which is debatable if it's an actually useful utility, but it is a cool utility, so I will take it. Other than that, the plus side of Wildstalker tree is that it does not break the spec like Druid of the Claw might, or force you to play the spec in a weird way that doesn't make sense. It just makes you be the same old Feral cat that you like to be, with a little bit more dot damage, which is great because that's what Ferals kind of want, but it has almost no interactions with your gameplay or rotation, period. And this all rounds up Feral to be one of the most disappointing reworks and designs of a spec going into the War Within, and its biggest issue is that it lives in a world where Fire Mage exists, and that is like looking at two specs from two different games. And we already covered Fire Mage in this video, and you can check out and see exactly why Fire Mage is the best to this day spec in World of Warcraft, whether you like Fire Mage or not.